Well, we begin this hour with new information coming out of Occupy Wall Street. According to recent reports that have been released by the FBI after a Freedom of Information Act was requested by Truth Out reporter Jason Leopold and the Partnership for Civil Justice, local law enforcement officials have teamed up with the FBI and Homeland Security in order to deal with the Occupy movement. What's more, the FBI actually invoked the term domestic terrorism when referring to nonviolent protesters in the Occupy movement, essentially confirming the movement organizers when they're saying that the political policing was happening across the country. Joining me now to break down this information coming out of this Foya request is independent journalist and activist Anna Lekas Miller. Hi there, Anna. So first things first, we already knew that the Occupy movement was being closely monitored by the government, but what information is coming out about the surveillance of the movement that we're learning now from this Foya request?
Well, we're learning basically that Jason Leopold did make this request during the movement at the end of 2011. It was not granted, and now it's coming out that it essentially lied about that this surveillance was happening the whole time, meaning that there were informants planted at the Occupy camps, both in New York and around the country, and that the FBI at the Department of Homeland Security were basically in partnership with corporate America, which is really, really frightening.
And one of the terms that the FBI invoked was this domestic terrorists term. So I have a few questions based on that. First of all, what is considered to fall under the realm of a domestic terrorist or domestic terrorism? And second, does this apply to the Occupy movement? Does it merit that title?
I think that they're using a very broad definition of violence to discuss domestic terrorism, because obviously an act of terrorism is, doing something that's going to kill a lot of people, blowing something up, something that's far more terrible and life-threatening than just a couple of people assembled in civil protest. So I think that they really, just ran with the possibility that it could get violent and used that to manufacture this threat of domestic terrorism, because that's really what the FBI has done in a lot of these terrorism cases. You saw it with Muslim and Arab communities, with the FBI spying on them. A lot of it was really them feeding this information to people who were alleged terrorists but had never done anything, and that's happening with Occupy right now and has been happening. It just only got brought to our attention.
Now, Anna, looking at these documents, I noticed that they were heavily redacted, meaning that large chunks of them were taken out. What kinds of information do you think lies below those black lines that are crossed off from anyone else to be able to read other than the people that are familiar with the case?
I think that's where a lot of the names are. That's where a lot of the names of people who would be targeted lie, because there have been talks of assassination attempt plots and things like that. So I think if those names were released of organizers, of people that were being intensely surveilled and targeted, then there would be so much more uproar in the press than we're seeing right now.
And I wanted to know from you, from your studies of these documents, they are relatively new, and a lot of people have yet to sort through them, but is there any indication of how far this surveillance actually expanded?
That's, someone mentioned this is really just the tip of the iceberg, and all we really know at this point was that they were there. And that, some of the people we chatted up, some of the people we were making friends with could have been informants. And, at this point in the news cycle, it's really the tip of the iceberg. We don't know a lot, which is scary.
And Anna, one of the interesting parts of this is that it wasn't just the FBI that was working with local law enforcement agencies. It was also the Department of Homeland Security and also corporate America, meaning that there was private security firms that they had talked to about this. And actually reading the article that just came out recently, it says that they discussed the OWS protests on the West Coast ports in order to, quote, raise awareness concerning this type of criminal activity. Do you consider the OWS movement criminal activity, or maybe specifically what happened in Los Angeles versus what happened across the country?
not at all. It's the First Amendment. It's freedom of speech. It's the right to assembly. It's the opposite of criminal activity. And what's so ironic with all of this, FBI, Homeland Security, etc., is that they're evoking this language of violence, of terrorism. And the violence side was really the police crackdown and the use of batons and tear gas and beating, and in some cases, really severely injuring people. So, it's really unnecessary.
So Anna, then the question comes down to, if they are not, like I just said, if they are not promoting or invoking criminal activity, then what exactly is criminal about what they're doing? Or is it solely the point that they have a political opinion that is dissenting from what Homeland Security and others believe in?
I think it's solely the point that they have a dissenting political opinion, and the fact that this level of organization and this level of mobilization and getting issues like class inequality into the press is threatening to these people and these large corporations, these business owners, and much larger forces than that. So that's where this crackdown comes in.
And Anna, a really interesting other part to note is that according to these Foya documents, they show that the FBI was also working with the New York Stock Exchange even before the Occupy Wall Street protests blossomed in earnest. So now, obviously, Wall Street is a key player in this story. Do you think this says anything, or could it be argued that this says anything about whose interests the police, the government, etc., were serving in this instance?
Oh, very much so. I think that Occupy Wall Street always used to say, let's be, not be run by corporations. And it just became so clear that while, the FBI and Homeland Security are supposed to work with the government to protect American citizens from actual terrorism threats, they're actually working with corporations and the stock exchange and the financial sector to protect them. So it's pretty obvious who gets protected in this society, who they're working for, and that we are in a way run by these forces. And in a way, it really reinforces all of the points that Occupy was making.
It's very interesting to see the information coming out of this Foya request. One thing also that we're learning is about this campus liaison program, meaning that they also contracted campus law enforcement officials to talk with them and to try to get them involved in working out this Occupy movement and many argue in stifling it. I appreciate you coming on and shedding a little bit of light on this Foya request. I think a lot more is going to be coming out in the near future. Anna Lekas Miller, independent journalist and activist, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.